Would you be able to forgive the person who hurt you the most? I didn't think I could. Let me back up. My mother and father got divorced when I was about 5 years old, and what I remember about their marriage was all of the screaming and shouting and crying. I remember one morning my parents were in the kitchen making breakfast, and I heard my father get angry at my mother. And he got so mad, he took those eggs and threw them across the floor, eggshells splattering everywhere. I remember looking up in the doorway thinking, what is he going to do next? Another time I was in the living room and they were going at it again. My father was pulling on my mom's hair. She's crying hysterically, and they're both shouting at me to go get the neighbor for help. I remember walking through the house at one point and seeing a hole punched through the wall from somebody having a moment. And I know that there were many more threats along the way. What I remember was that seed of fear that was planted inside me. How many of us have witnessed these types of closed-door moments in our own families? After they got divorced, they both remarried. My father was in the military, and at one point he got stationed overseas. So he wanted his new wife to come meet my sister and me. We had a short visit, and after we said our goodbyes, that was it. That was the last time I saw my father. I was 8 years old. And over the years, he did try to contact us many times, and in the beginning we would have phone calls. But we had a new dad in our family, my stepdad, and he was stable and strong and loving, and we wanted our family to move forward away from all the drama. So the more he tried to contact us, the more resistant I became to him. And that seed of fear that was planted inside of me turned into anger and resentment and even hate. It was easier to hate him than it was to cry about the sadness of that whole situation. So how did I handle all of these emotions as I was growing up? Well, I started to build a wall right around my heart to protect myself because I couldn't trust anybody. Growing up, we moved a lot, and I was always the new kid in school, so I was always making new friends. And every time I made a new friend, I'd add another layer to that wall. And then we'd move again and meet new friends in the neighborhood, and I'd add another layer. In college, I had a boyfriend who cheated on me. Whoa, I added several layers around my heart after that for all future relationships coming. And I continued to build layer after layer after layer. And on the outside, it looked like I had a lot of friends and a great social network. But on the inside, I was only going to let you get so close. The kicker to all of this was I had no idea I was operating this way. That fortress of a wall that I was creating was making me a hard individual behind it. I looked at the world black and white. I was hard on people. I was hard on myself. I was very independent, but I started to have that attitude of I can do anything, I don't need anybody. And it wasn't until I went to a weekend retreat program that I had this epiphany. And I thought I was at this program because I had a block about money. And the program was about transformation and breakthroughs so that you can show up in the world and live your life fulfilled. So I was there to do the work. And I thought it had something to do with money. And on the first day, I realized I am not here about the money. I am here about my Father. And the question that popped into my head was, what if I forgive the man who hurt me the most and who hurt me first? Would it allow all of the relationships that came after that for me to show up differently in those relationships because of forgiving him? And so I went with the question and thought, I need to show up less guarded. What does living a life fulfilled look like when you're so guarded? What does it look like to be guarded in a marriage? What does it look like to be guarded around your children or at work in front of your boss or your coworkers? How about your customers or your clients when you're protected by all these walls? So I said to myself that weekend, if I'm going to let my walls down, this is the time to do it. And that day, I made a decision to take the biggest risk of my life, my father, and forgive him for everything I remember him doing. I had no idea where on the planet he was. But with the power of social media, I was able to find a relative who gave me his number. And the next day, I called him. And I remember standing with my phone in my hand, and my stomach was churning. I was nauseous. I thought I was going to throw up. My heart was beating so hard behind that wall of layers I had created for so many years. And suddenly, I had to make this call. So I did. And he answered the phone. Hello? And I said, "This is Edna. It is just me calling. I'm not here to represent anybody else in my family. And I want to tell you that I have hated you for the pain that you caused this family. I have hated you for the pain and the seed of fear that you planted in my 5-year-old soul. And I am here to tell you that that is the past. I'm not that little girl anymore. Today is a new day, and I forgive you." And through his tears, he responded, "Edna, I have been dreaming about this moment." And he went on to talk about how sorry he was for the pain that he had inflicted on all of us. He blamed himself for not having handled that situation in a different way. He took 100% responsibility for his actions. And he went on to say how much he had loved my sister and me, that we were always a part of his heart. He had never forgotten us, and that he loved us immensely. And he had suffered too. His punishment, he hadn't seen his own children in 30 years. As a mother, I can't even imagine that. I cried in that moment, a cry of relief that something I didn't even know was buried inside me was finally released. Those toxic emotions that I had around that man were gone. And for the next 38 minutes, I learned that my father had served in the military for well over 25 years. He was retired and still working. He was married to the same woman for 30 years. He had 2 boys of his own that I knew existed, but I had never met, my brothers. They too were out of the house, building their own beautiful families. And really, after listening to my father and looking at what his life became, I believed him when he said, "I'm sorry." And in this weekend program, this retreat, we were encouraged to invite family and friends to come witness all of the breakthroughs and transformations that happened that weekend. And I heard this little voice inside me say, "Ask him, ask him." And the other little voice said, "Are you really going to do this?" And before I chickened out, I invited my father to come up from Atlanta, Georgia, where he was, to Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, where I was, to join me for the closing of this program. And his response, "I will do whatever it takes to be there." And 2 days later, I met my father in person for the first time in 32 years. I will tell you, it has been a healing process for these last 3 years. There's a quote that I heard recently from a psychiatrist at Johns Hopkins, Dr. Karen Schwartz, and she defines forgiveness like this: "Forgiveness is an active process where you make a conscious decision to let go of the negative feelings, whether the person deserves it or not." That was the part I always used to get stuck on. I didn't believe that my father deserved my forgiveness. And as we went through our conversations, and we talk a lot, I learned that my father was 21 years old when I was born. I never knew that. Think about the 20-somethings in your life who are screwing up and living with the consequences for the rest of their life. And when I say that to you, that does not mean I condone or accept anything he did, because I don't. It was awful and unexcusable to see him hit my mother. But that phone call was not for him. That forgiveness was for me. It didn't matter if my father deserved it or not. I deserved it. I deserved letting go of harboring all those feelings of animosity that I had towards him. That toxicity was living in me. And so I've gotten to know my father in these last few years, and trust has been the biggest test. Because I have to remember that I can't bring the past to the present relationship with him if I think we're going to have a future together. I'm committed to this healing process, as hard as it is, because my comfort zone is putting up walls. I'm really good at that. But I need to learn how to let those walls down if I'm going to have rich relationships in the rest of my life. Because no matter where I go, those walls come with me in every relationship, beginning at home. Forgiving my father changed my marriage. The way I talk to my husband and relate to my husband, I'm more open and vulnerable, and I communicate differently with him. Forgiving my father changed my relationship with my 2 kids. We talk about saying I'm sorry. We talk about our mistakes. We talk about long-lasting consequences when we hurt each other, and we talk about forgiveness. And I'm more open with them. The relationship with my husband to my kids has also changed. We are so aware about the father role in a family, and it is a critical role we need to look at more closely. My friendships have changed. I allow my friends to go past that wall I used to have and get to know me. And if you hurt me, I forgive you much sooner. There's a quote that says, forgiving someone doesn't change the past, but it sure can change the future. And I know that so many of us are here to make an impact on the world. And I believe that if we lower those walls and we shine our hearts more and forgive sooner, we're going to make a greater impact. Because when we do that for ourselves, we create that environment for other people to do the same thing. And don't you think the impact is going to be greater when everybody's got their walls down and everybody's got their hearts shining? And when we show up like that raw and real and open, anything can happen. Thank you.